Welcome to another episode of Social Media Made Simple. And today my guest is Grace Clemens, the CEO of SGC Marketing. And she is an amazing specialist in the digital marketing audit space especially for e-commerce brands. So Grace brings a unique perspective to discussions around marketing, particularly in crafting and executing multi-channel marketing strategies that makes what everyone wants. That means driving revenue and foster meaningful engagement. In today's episode, we will talk about Grace's perspective on digital marketing for e-commerce and also a bit about findings from our report that we have done with Norstat, which explores how UK consumers engage with brands on social media. Grace, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
All right, let's dive right in. You have spent over a decade in helping e-commerce brands thrive. So what would you say is the biggest shift you have seen in the digital marketing space during that time? And how have you adopted to stay ahead?
Sure. So I love this question. I would say the number one thing that I have seen shifted in the full 13 years since I've been in marketing is the heat on brands to be socially responsible. Before social media existed, they didn't have this public forum really where people could take to and say the company is not sustainable or the company is not diverse or the company is not honoring its return policy. Now, social media, that has what has changed the most for businesses is they don't have an excuse now. They have no way to falsify that, right? So you have a social responsibility as a business now, and consumers will hold you to that through social media. The second biggest shift that I've seen in the marketing industry is storytelling, I would say. We've seen through Facebook and Instagram, things from infographics and moving videos and animations. There's different ways to tell stories. We used to just sit in front of a camera and tell the story as it was. Now you can tell stories through short videos, through creative digital art. There's just a total different way to tell stories now. And that would be something that I feel like has changed specifically for B2B brands as well, because that's a little bit more dense heavy in terms of the topics and information, and the way that you can tell those stories has definitely shifted. Not to say that doesn't apply for B2C as well. Yeah. And to answer your follow-up question in terms of how I stay up to date with that, I'm a marketer that always adapts to the market. So that means I'm always using the platforms. I'm always testing my hypotheses to check in with the algorithm or any types of new features. And that also means that I'm always brushing up on my digital marketing skills. So when we migrated from Google Analytics to GA4 and, using new editing tools and things like that. So I would say for anybody who's in the social media marketing industry, be ready to adapt. Don't forget to brush up on your skills. We are never done learning in this industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And the industry is keeping us definitely on our toes.
To say the least.
To say the least. I'm almost scared to open up my Instagram now to see what Adam Mosseri is going to say next. But I really loved what you said about especially bringing accountabilities to the brand, especially that I think more and more people, their values, they feel like their values need to align to the values of their brand, and they are not willing anymore to support brands that kind of slack in that area. So you bring expertise in digital marketing audits, and I can imagine that during those audits some of those things come up. So but to take a step back, can you explain what a digital marketing audit entails and how it can impact an e-commerce brand's revenue specifically?
Absolutely. So when you're doing an audit, it depends on whether you're doing a full scope audit. If you're doing a full scope audit, that's going to include your website, that's going to include your email marketing, that's going to include your social media channels, and maybe even SMS, basically anywhere that you have a customer journey going on and you're putting out content and connecting with your customer. If you're doing an audit that's social media specific, that's going to include your executive summary, your KPIs, a review of your organic social, including top performing content and peak time of posting and peak traffic. And then you'll do a microscopic view into your paid social, so your top performing ads, how much have you spent, how much have you made, and then you go into your final points where you have your action goals and your actionable insights. If you're doing a more deep dive, which, when in doubt, I say analyze it all, but you're going to have, of course, again, your executive summary, your goals and your KPIs. You're going to dive into your website traffic. Then you're going to dive into your data analysis with whether that's Klaviyo or MailChimp. You're going to want to deep dive into your email strategy. How's that looking implementation wise? What's your revenue? What's your open rate? What's your click-through rate? What's your placed order rate? You're going to look at a revenue comparison, whether that's month on month or quarter on quarter. And of course, your top performing emails. Look at those subject lines. Which ones worked? Look inside those emails. What did people click on? What worked the most? And then again, into your content review, into your social media, what did the best? What didn't do the best? And really looking at a microscopic view, I would say it's really important to focus on your top 3 contents, because that allows you to really look in deeper rather than casting your net wide. So there's sometimes you're going to want to cast your net wide, and sometimes you're going to want to pull it in a little bit. And then again, into your final points with your action goals and your actionable insights. So B2B and B2C audits look a little bit different, but for the most part, we're looking at an overall audit of how your customer journey versus your strategy is working. Where are the missed opportunities? Where's the low-hanging fruit? What's already working? What definitely didn't work? And I would say in terms of how that's going to impact your e-commerce brand and the revenue, number one, you're always focusing on purpose and engagement and those values, like we mentioned, about aligning with your audience. That's going to lead to more revenue, right? Some of your strategy will be listening to customers, responding to them. Maybe that means just solving an issue for them. That's going to lead to more revenue. Every time you are making an effort to be more aligned with your values and your audience and your brand, you're going to see the audience reward you for that. They're going to be more connected to your brand. And then, of course, you have just obvious wins, right? If we see that you don't have automation set up and we say, you know what, we can add a miss you abandoned cart email in there, that's going to impact your revenue. So this audit is about finding the long game, right? Where can we make a long-term relationship impact with our audience versus short-term? What can we do now to make sure that we have better customer experiences, higher checkout rates? And that's all included with the audit. I think that's why I love doing it so much, because every audit is really different and is circumstantial to every business. And it's always nice to see those findings in there and see the impact.
Absolutely. And then the beauty is in the complexity. I'm wondering also, you mentioned, like, right, engagement is bringing revenue. So in the report that I mentioned in the beginning, we found that, surprisingly to me, that men are more active on social media when it comes to buying than female buyers. They're engaged in multiple platforms during the whole process. So that data alone shows the importance of personalization in social media. And I think this is something many still fear, to make it too narrow, I guess. So how to make an easy start and a first step into personalization?
Absolutely. Yeah. I would say start small, right? That means what's the most simple type of segmentation that we can do, whether that's gender, location, age, that's going to be based on your back end. What's the most easy to implement? Most platforms will have those built in for you. So I would just say start small. You don't have to be segmenting into 10 different ad sets right now, but you can start with two. You can start with men versus women and anyone who falls out of those, and age and location. So when it comes to starting with segmentation and personalization, start small. This also includes with emails. There's low lift coding you can do where it's hi first name. That's personalization, right? So just making sure that you have those tiny little things in there that makes it seem more less automated and more interactive to the person. So start small. That's what I would say in terms of where to start.
Mm-hmm. And you already mentioned it with the audits. Then it's like every audit is different, but over the course of your career, you worked with a variety of companies from B2C to B2B. So do you see any universal marketing principles that can be applied across all industries, or is it really everyone requires a completely different approach?
No strategy fits all. So I would say to answer your question in a nutshell, post with purpose, know your values, and know your audience. Those are the three rules that apply to every brand out there, whether you're B2C, B2C, D2C, whoever, wherever you are. Post with purpose, know your values, and know your audience. But outside of that, it's going to get circumstantial because you see brands like Ryanair and Duolingo who are crushing it on social. Those strategies just don't work for every brand. If we had Louis Vuitton on social media being unhinged, we wouldn't resonate with that. So know your purpose, know your values, and know your audience, and that will lead the rest of your decisions.
Exactly, because within the purpose, the values, and audiences, you have almost an infinite amount and infinite range of possibilities. Um, so, although I think some of us would wish that we could sometimes be so unhinged as Ryanair, at least I have this like little persona in me that I want to be the Ryanair social media manager. But uh, yeah. Speaking of which, in our report, we highlight that younger generations use social media in a different way than maybe as millennials. So one of the purposes is also using social platforms as a search engine. So what's your view on how should e-commerce brands optimize their social media presence to cater to this need and to this new behavior of younger users?
Absolutely. So I would say using SEO to inform your content is going to be the winning principle right there. YouTube is a great platform to look at. You should be using SEO in general, your SEO tools to find out what people are searching for, what keywords are going to work with your brand, and tying those keywords into your content strategy and the content that you make. I'm using YouTube as an example because they have really done a great job at building SEO tools into the platform itself. And their SEO on YouTube is a little bit different than what you may see on Google, Bing, and all the other search platforms. So taking YouTube's sort of idea of how to do this and how to do that, and thinking about if I were my audience, what would I be typing into the search bar? And most likely that's a how to cook chicken or something, like it's going to be a how to, or you're going to type in what you would actually type in as a human being. So using your SEO within the platform and any other external tools that you can use to inform that decision. So that will not only inform what content you create, but how you title it, how you caption it, how you put it out there into the world.
Awesome. So, based on your experience, what would you say there are some common mistakes that e-commerce businesses make when they're developing their strategies?
I would say probably, well, number one would be trying to be Duolingo or Ryanair, right? I think that's something that we've seen in the industry. We've seen a lot of brands follow up, and try to be unhinged. So that would be number one, is just being yourself, being who your brand is, and also making sure your brand aligns with your audience. Because if those two don't align, they're not going to work. Another mistake I see is having one person doing the team of maybe 10 people on a marketing team. I would say, I know not every brand has the budget to build out a team for every platform. In a dream world, that's how it would be. That's how we see the large FMCG brands running things. So I would say take a step back and, map out your marketing team. And if you can only hire 3 people, ask yourself what is going to be the most effective for your business. If graphic design, which that should be one of them, that imagery and branding is so, so, so important. And looking at what are the 2 other tiers that go along with that, and how can you kind of cast the net wide without having one person in the mixing pot doing it all. Because when you do have one person in the mixing pot doing it all, it's not going to come out as smooth, and you're also going to burn that person out. I'm trying to think if there's any other mistakes, because there's a ton of them out there. There's the fact of posting and forgetting, right? Not having a
Yeah.
community manager on there. I think that's something your report covered a lot of, is the customer response time and the importance of responding to your customers and prioritizing those comments and questions. So I guess those would be my top 3 mistakes.
Exactly. And I would say what we talk about a lot is also looking at your investment in ads, because sometimes we do a lot of social advertising and then we completely forgot about the comments that are underneath those ads. And if you neglect that, you can be in not a nice place. So, and again, if you just have one person, it's almost impossible to deliver that high value experience, especially that and I think UK consumers are patient, because it was like 54% expect an answer within 3 hours, but 12 to 14% want it within 30 minutes. So definitely there is a sense of urgency there. And well, I kind of wanted to lure you into the AI space with the mistakes that brand make. But our report also touches on how AI is perceived, especially on the customer service side. I'm not talking about AI generated visuals, right? So a conclusion that was also somewhat surprising to me is that customers are not entirely against it. So what are your thoughts on the role of AI in social media marketing? And do you have any good tips on how to balance the much needed automations with building a genuine human connection?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is one of the hottest topics right now. So I would say off the bat that humans need connection. So if you take away that option to speak to a human, then you're cutting off that connection. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't use AI, but always give people the option to speak to a human if AI cannot solve their problem, and be honest and transparent about how AI is helping the business, helping them. Make space for feedback, right? And back to that main point, make sure that you're making it clear, saying, hey, this AI is here to help you right now, but if it can't help you, this is what you're going to do next, how you can get in touch with the person. Because once you cut that cord and you don't allow for a human to human interaction, as much as AI is valid, I think every brand should be using it, right? But remembering that human connection is really what's keeping your brand connected to humans. That's what makes the relationship. So keeping that in mind, that AI is great, it's efficient, you should absolutely be using it and integrating it into all of your messaging and your automations, but don't leave out connection, and don't forget about connection, because that is very, very important.
Exactly. And I think me personally, I get frustrated now when I get an AI agent and I'm just asking it, could you please put me forward to a human, which is a very bizarre experience, really. To say like, hey, can I please talk to like your human counterpart? Um, but I think without that, you're absolutely right. It can create so much frustration and it just loses kind of the face. And I guess we are still at our core connected to emotions, and I think it's just so important to keep that in mind. So thank you for
Yeah, and again, as you mentioned, like use FAQs and use your SEO to inform how that AI is going to help people, right? So make sure that you do have frequently asked questions that are going to hopefully solve the problem, because AI can help the customer. But that's why I feel like it's really important to make it clear of why the AI is there, because yes, AI is there to help the business, weed through all of the queries and get to the ones that AI can't solve. So making that clear and making sure that you've done your research in what questions the AI is able to help with.
Yeah, exactly. And be very deliberate with it. I think
Yeah.
that's the key. So you've held positions at both like large companies like Silk Thread and smaller, and now like you're running your own company now. What advice would you give to marketers who are transitioning in between these different environments, especially now where we also feel kind of the pressure of AI and staying on top with different trends, and I have this feeling that it's not getting easier.
Yeah, I think there's pros and cons to each type of work environment. There's not neither one is better than the other. I think that the commonality would be knowing how not to burn out in both of them, right? So, I've been in full-time jobs where I just, work overtime, 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 and that's not going to get you anywhere. And the same with when you're an entrepreneur on your own. I think that has probably been my biggest point of growth, is realizing when I'm at the point of overworking myself and when it's time to sign off and fill my cup back up again so I can give the best to my clients or my job, whichever one that is. And then from a practical standpoint, I would say if you're transitioning, making sure that you're always keeping track of your KPIs and the work that you've delivered, because that's super important for you to take forward, whether or not you're going the entrepreneurial route or you're going the full-time route and you want to raise or you want to go to a different job. You should always be tracking, what goals have I actioned? What goals have I accomplished and how much value have I given to the company?
Hmm. Yeah, that's so important, especially that I think, especially when we are super busy, we just go, go, go. And sometimes you reflect back on it and then you're okay, so what are my
Especially in
greatest
social,
achievements? Yeah.
especially in social media, right?
Yes, yes. And then you're like, oh yes, what did I do? I posted a lot of content and it seems sometimes so trivial, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's like a great advice, especially if you want to think about self-reflection is sometimes a challenge. It's easier to talk, about project achievements, but also personally for your growth and your development, looking at, okay, but personally, what am I proud of? That can be also challenging if you're looking back a year. But if you look at a quarter, then you can really make it more actionable for yourself.
Absolutely.
And looking ahead, what would you say is the one emerging trend, especially for e-commerce brands, that you should be paying a very close attention to in the next, let's say, 12 months?
Sure. So I love this question, and I couldn't think of just one, but I'll give you my
Okay.
number one. I'll give you my number
Or
one, and
you
then
can give us top three, maybe.
okay. I think the number one thing is going to be long form content. We're going to see a shift in importance back to long form content. That's not to say short form content is not just as important, but I think we are seeing, as you know, a digital revolution as it rolls out. People are becoming more aware of how short their attention spans are becoming, and they're thinking about how they want to spend their morning. And in the morning, you're not going to open up social media apps. We are aware that this short form, fast form, hearing everybody shout into the forum is not the best thing for your mind in the morning. That's when we turn to long form content. Long form content is going to be more and more important. It's going to come back into the hemisphere. We also saw that TikTok, and I believe it was Instagram, that now allows more than it's 10 minutes on TikTok, and we've seen that this has become longer and longer. So again, short form is still just as important, but don't overlook long form, and consider where that long form content lies in your strategy. So that would be my number one, because AI doesn't count. We already know that.
No, and yeah, that's not news for anyone, right?
We know that's going to be a trend.
Yeah.
Two other things that I think are another thing that I think will be a trend is we're going to see LinkedIn and Pinterest continue to grow. LinkedIn kind of came onto the scene as like the professional version of Facebook, and we saw its second boom when millennials grew up and really went into the workforce. We went into our 30s, we went into our careers. All of a sudden, what we posted, we wanted to be more professional focused, right? We're going to see that we saw the second boom when Gen Z came into the workforce, and they shifted away from, we're going to go post professionally on LinkedIn. Personally, I think that's why we saw the shift in how people are using LinkedIn, because Gen Z is a little bit more open online than millennials are, and they're a little bit more comfortable on sharing on LinkedIn. I admire it. So that's why I think we've seen the shift in LinkedIn, and that's not going to slow down. LinkedIn is going to be a vital player in the game, and they're only going to continue to grow. Pinterest specifically, don't overlook this as an e-commerce brand, because Pinterest is the one platform that people go to seriously unwind, manifest, relax, paint their dreams, whether they're planning a wedding or making their mood board for 2025. I have heard so many people talking about how they have been spending more time on Pinterest because it doesn't leave them with the scrolling doom and the fear. So don't overlook Pinterest. Multi-channel strategy is ever more important. That would be my third trend, is just you should be having a multi-channel strategy. We've seen the issues with TikTok happen, which affected Canva. So you should have one platform, of course, that you feel like, okay, this is my head platform. This is where most of my engagement comes from. But don't depend on that. Make sure you're always cross promoting and making sure that your audience follows you on more than just one platform. Last but not least, I think live social shopping. We've seen TikTok pioneer this. I would keep an eye on how that's going to be more in your strategy. On your guys' report, as we discussed earlier, males are more active in shopping, but women are more active in leaving reviews and shopping in lives. So,
Yeah.
or no, men were more involved in shopping on lives. But either way, you should be thinking about, can we do a live strategy? Can we push those sales through there? What incentives are you going to give people to tune in? Making sure it's a clear objective and you're not just going live to go live, but you actually have something for people to tune in. I think it's kind of like the new age QVC. So live social shopping, consider it, think about it, integrate it into your strategy. Same for SMS. That would be it. That's it.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, that was my last question, and certainly a super interesting conversation. I just got inspired to go home and maybe go to my happy Pinterest place. Um, but it makes so much sense. I think so many of us get overstimulated, and it's still like just this, you know, mellow, mellow place on social media. So, Grace, for people who got inspired and wanted perhaps to work with you, where can they find you?
Absolutely. So my website is GracieClemens.com. That's GracieClemens.com. or you can find me on LinkedIn, Grace Clemens, linkedin.com/Grace Clemens. And I'm also offering free 15-minute social media audits for anybody interested. You can find those on my website. You can get in touch on my website, or you can get in touch in LinkedIn. Very easy to reach.
Perfect. And for our listeners, thank you for tuning in to this episode. Make sure to check out the otherwise, and of course, subscribe not to miss the future ones. Thank you so much. Take care, and let's go see some Pinterest photos now.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.